I would like to welcome everyone on the call to our 2022 Black History Month interview with the Kelly Williams family. So we have Dr. Theresa Hammond. She's going to moderate the session this afternoon with the Kelly Williams family. Dr. Hammond is an accounting professor at San Francisco State University. She is the author of A White Collar Profession, which really is captures historically since 1921, all of the first 100 Black licensed CPAs in the United States. This is a beautiful historical piece of context that really lets you take a closer look at the challenges that Black CPAs, Black accountants faced upon entering or attempting to enter the profession. She is also a NABA member since 1988 and serves on our ACAP board. So I want to make sure we use this time to really dig into the Kelly Williams family, to let them share with us their legacy, their motivations, and their work. So I am going to turn it over to Dr. Hammond.
Good evening, everybody. It's a real honor here to be here with the Kelly Williams family. I did interview David for my book 30 years ago. And so it's really nice to see everybody else and to also see just how prolific the family has been in not only becoming accountants and CPAs, but also leaders in NABA. There's so many people on this call who were president of their student chapters or founder of a city's chapter. It's really, really meaningful for me to be part of this group tonight. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to start with Alexandra, the youngest, who just recently became a CPA. Congratulations. The past couple of years. I know that your career was inspired both by your family and by the ACAP event that you attended when you were in high school. Can you share a little bit with us about your journey?
Absolutely. I feel like I'm a little different than most people. I knew that I wanted to be an accountant at a pretty young age. My uncle, Lewis, who is on this call, is introduced me to the NABA ACAP program, which is the Accounting Career Awareness Program, which is for high school students to kind of introduce you to the field of accounting and all of the different avenues that you can take within accounting to create a career path. And prior to that, my aunt is also an accountant. My dad is in finance. My mom was in banking for a while. So and of course, all of my cousins here are also in accounting. So I had a lot of people to look up to and people to model my career path after. So I think that having these close connections and inspirations to join the accounting field has been a great light to try to follow after.
Yeah, we definitely find that in many careers, the lack of role models is what perpetuates a lack of representation in the profession. And so you had a unique experience, and many people your age don't have any family members who are accountants. So I just find it pretty amazing. You probably just didn't even think anything of it when you were a kid.
And it's funny, actually, a friend of mine the other day, as the correspondence about this event was being passed around, they're like, how did I not know that you came from an accounting family? And it's just like, it's not something that you think about. I think that, I mean, it seemed normal to me prior to getting this event set up, where having 6 or plus back African Americans in your family that are all CPAs is apparently pretty rare, but it's not something, like I said, that you realize when you're living it.
One of the men I interviewed for my book, when I asked him, how he achieved what he did, he said, "We weren't making history, we were just trying to get jobs." So, he didn't think of it that way. So I'm going to turn to Lewis now. You were one of the founding members of the Chicago chapter of NABA and one of the masterminds of the regional student conferences, which my students have attended over the years, and I really appreciate that. Can you tell us a little bit about what they were like in the early 80s and what the impact they had on the profession?
I wouldn't say mastermind. We were all so young when we started the chapter that, we were just barely being past students ourselves. As a matter of fact, when the chapter was formed in 1977, I was literally in my last semester of college myself. So we knew the importance of exposing more accountants and more accounting students to the profession, to let them know. But also the more important thing, what was so important about those early student conferences was it gave young accounting students the opportunity to meet other accountants across the country so they wouldn't feel like they were on such an island in the profession, because many times they were in classes where they were the one or two kids who were taking those accounting classes. But as importantly as that, we also wanted them to know that there were opportunities. So we made sure we had the companies that interview students, and we asked the companies to interview even the freshmen and sophomores that came, so they could go through the process. So by the time they got to be juniors and seniors and actually began interviewing with these companies, that they would be extremely comfortable doing it. So we just, it was kind of self-serving to the extent that we had all been so new. And again, like I said, went into a profession that didn't look a lot like us. So we just felt it was important to expose as many students to the interviewing process, to other things to help sharpen their skills so that they became better candidates to fill some of the accounting vacancies.
And I know that Chicago in 1965, when the 100th African American became a CPA, Chicago had more Black CPAs than any other city in the country. And that's partly due to David Kelly and also due to Mary Washington, the first Black female CPA in the country. But you were saying that even in that period in the late 70s, early 80s, you doubled the number of Black CPAs in the city.
Exactly. That was one of the things NABA did. As a matter of fact, we'd be at the CPA exam when it was given twice a year in May and November. And we would search out the other African Americans in the room and say, "Are you a member of NABA?" And they say, "No, you become a member." So what happens as a result of that, the number of African American CPAs in 1977 in Illinois numbered about 100. And I would say over the next 10 years that number easily doubled, if not tripled. And most of those people came through NABA. And it was with the encouragement of each other. We kept telling people, if you flunk it, take it again. Don't skip exams was kind of our motto. Keep taking it till you pass it. A lot of people, there were a few extra bright people who took it one time and passed it all in the first sitting. But most of us weren't that fortunate. So it was that encouragement from people, and it was, as we alluded to, if I can pass it, certainly you can pass it. So, so I think that contributed. And also just the general environment in terms of the number of firms here, Washington, Pittman, and McKeever, which started off as Mary Washington's firm. You had Hill Taylor, later you had Odell Hicks, you had Bill Anderson with his firm. So there were a lot of people out here that, as role models, so you can see it. And the business climate was conducive.
Yeah, people moved from across the country to Chicago just for the opportunity to work for a Black CPA, because there weren't Black CPAs in most other parts of the country. So that's a really good point, though, about just reminding people not to get discouraged and to persevere just by being a role model, and just the important role that NABA has played throughout history in that regard. One of the great pleasures for me of being able to revisit the Kelly family, through Mr. Kelly, is that I went back to my file on him, and I had several speeches. He sent me several speeches that he had made in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so I reread the speeches that he made, and I want to ask Kathy a question about one of the speeches, because in 1979, Mr. Kelly said, he was talking to the White House Conference on Small Business, and he said that tax incentives would provide greater access to the marketplace for minority-owned businesses. And I noticed that Kathy has worked in the Community Reinvestment Act activities when she was with JP Morgan. And I was just thinking how you're following this tradition that you're, I don't want to say cousin, but that you're a relative.
I married into this wonderful family, and David was on point with his speech. Before the pandemic, it was already difficult for minority businesses and entrepreneurs to get access to capital, let alone now where many entrepreneurs have been really, hit hard since the pandemic. And I found a stat that said that white business owners are 7 times more likely to get a bank loan during their first year of business than Black business owners. So I believe that more funds should, continue to be focused on community-focused lenders like CDFIs. I think we need to figure out a way to strengthen the Community Reinvestment Act. And I think these big banks should review their own policies for determining credit worthiness. I also think that boards of banks should increase their minority representation because we help each other. And we know the policies that these organizations need to be put in place to assist these businesses. And lastly, I'll mention that the technical assistance training should be made to new startup businesses to help them develop their operations. And this is where the accounting profession could really, really get involved.
Yeah, we all know that African-American businesses have to provide a lot more evidence to get the same amount of a loan as a white business that's in a very similar situation. They talk about the thick files and the thin files. You've got a real thick file before the African-American business gets the loan because the bank continually is asking for more and more information that others are not required to provide. So I just think it's great that you're following, everybody's doing something interesting and different in this family, but that you're also, fulfilling the comments that your relative made, 30, 40 years ago, 40 years ago, 43 years ago. So Michelle, also, I wanted to ask you, I saw another speech that your dad made in 1974, where he talked about the importance of serving the Black community. It's clear from your career and your volunteer roles that you are making him and your mother very proud with what you're doing. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the service that you contribute to the community and what gives you the most fulfillment in your career.
Yes, I want to first say that happy anniversary, Daddy, for 60 years of being a CPA. And my father not only is a CPA for 6 years, this year, my mom and my dad are celebrating 62 years of marriage. So my mom and my dad have always been the motivation in my life. As my father was writing that speech in 1974 about the importance of serving the Black community, my mom was actually serving in the Black community. At that time, we were living in Chicago. And 2 years after that is when my father became, in 1976, is when my father became the first African-American to go through the ranks and become partner of any major accounting firm. And at that time, it was Arthur Andersen. A year after that, we moved to Flossmoor, predominantly white suburb. And I saw my mother continuing to serve. My father afforded my mom the opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom. But my mom was not only our mom, my mom was volunteering. She was the Black mom of our high school. She's started several activities, several volunteers to help the Black community. So in Chicago, we were in Flossmoor. She just made a habit. She was serving. And what I like is my career role, graduating from college, I started working for Lewis Williams, my cousin on the line now, at W&W Consulting. Even though we did major accounts, but we also served mostly African-American entrepreneurs in the community. And when I started my own firm, I served not-for-profits in the community. And I really like serving and making sure the financial operations are taken care of with the African Americans either in not-for-profits or entrepreneurs in the community. So because they need operations to be successful.
Yeah, I'd love to play that tape back for my students because understanding the finances and the accounting is essential to all business decisions. And sometimes they think accounting is sort of marginalized, but obviously it's a central part of the success of every organization, no matter what the industry, whether it's a not-for-profit or a city, like you work with municipalities as well.
Yes, I'm actually the finance director from the municipality. Growing up in the white suburb, when my father became partner, we moved to white suburb. But growing up there, I actually left many days, many weekends, left there to hang out in African-American suburb. And now I'm just having to be the finance director of one of the suburbs that I hung out in.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. That's great. It's great. Just being able to provide that expertise that you developed at your cousin's firm, and then also through your own pursuit of the CPAs is really, I I know that it can really magnify the positive effects on various cities that really need fiscal oversight. So I'm glad to hear that you're back in your old stomping grounds.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
So how about you now, Paul? I also have another speech that I brought up with you is that Mr. Kelly, in a 1974 address to a scholarship dinner, he's talking to African-American students who had won scholarships to college. He talked about why business is a good choice of field to study. Your career, and you can take us through it a little bit if you don't mind, it has taken a lot of interesting turns that might not be what most new CPAs expect. So what would you say to young people about choosing an accounting major and what you can do with it?
Yeah, I would say he's absolutely correct. And business is a great place to start, and within business, accounting is a great field to pursue. I mean, you garner just great skills. You can take those skills and combine that with a way to understand the businesses that you're working with, and a way to communicate the findings and what those numbers mean to management. It gives you a way to see all parts of the business. Or run your own business. As you can see, you've got people who have their own businesses. I would tell you, I guess, in terms of the turns, I work for the ABC affiliate here in Houston. I did not see that coming when I started in accounting. I've audited the Cubs. I have friends who are accountants who work for the Cubs. I've done some work in hotels in Canada. I know people who do finance for movies. You can work in a lot of different interesting industries. I can't be in front of the camera, for TV, but I can, still be involved in a lot of the decision making that goes on at our station. So it just gives you a really good basis to pursue whatever you want to do.
I'm so glad you said communicate, because I always tell my students the system will calculate the numbers. What you have to do is understand them and communicate them to other areas of the organization, the city, the company, whatever it is, the not-for-profit. They have to understand the importance of the results of the company. So that's great. And you work for ABC in Houston now, but you also worked for the WGN in Chicago, right?
Yes.
Before that?
Yeah, worked for WGN Radio. I worked for Tribune. So I worked for Tribune. I was an internal auditor there. So that was a really great experience doing auditing for them. Like I said, I worked in Canada, in Seattle. I worked at newspapers in San Diego. I got to see a lot of different industries within the media on the media side.
Yeah, you've moved a lot more. I think geographically, you've moved more than most people on the call, though Alexandra might catch up because she was in Louisiana, Chicago, Louisiana, and now Washington, D.C. So she's got a chance to catch up, but a lot of other roots right there in Chicago, which is nice too. Especially my dad would be super happy to meet your friends who work for the Cubs, because my dad was a huge Cubs fan. So, well, let's go back to David, in my Brady Bunch setup, he's in the center where he belongs in my Zoom call. And I know everybody doesn't see it the same way, but David, your career included creating pathways for others within majority institutions. And I was wondering if you could share some of your successes in making a difference for other people in the various organizations with which you worked.
Well, thank you, Theresa. I was a late starter as far as getting into, say, public accounting, because when I graduated from college, the accounting firms, the large ones, would not interview Black candidates. And so I sort of looked through what might be available, and I saw the Internal Revenue Service as one that needed people who were accountants, needed people who could audit. And it was a great training ground for me to go from my school to actually dealing with, I'll say, taxpayers or people, one-on-one, not being a part of a group. As it was said, I graduated in 1960. The CPA exam was a school book exam. I took it, I conditioned it. in 61 and became a CPA in 62. I worked with a lot of Black, mainly men, who they were skeptical and some fear about taking the CPA exam. And I've always considered myself a positive leader. And I would encourage people, look, and as Lewis took my line, look, if I can do it, I know you can do it. And so there were maybe 10, 12 young accountants at the Internal Revenue Service that I counseled. And really it was pep talks. I also did some teaching at the Internal Revenue Service when I was 25 years old. They had me teaching new Internal Revenue agents coming in. And this one class, for the first time, a Black female showed up. And she was a graduate of Tennessee State. And maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the course, it's a group of instructors, 3. My other 2 instructors came to me and said, David, we need to talk. This lady, she's not cutting it. And I said, well, let me see her grades. So they did. And I looked at them and she was having some problems. And so then I, in my racist mood, said, let me see all the grades. And I'm just joking when I said racist. I'm a businessman and I make business decisions. I don't make them on a racial basis either, unless I have to. But I saw all the grades, and there were about 4 or 5 white men who had the same level of accomplishment as this lady did. So I posed to my fellow instructors, I tell you what we do. Why don't we fire all of them? And they said, well, wait a minute, David. Wait a minute. And I said, I tell you what we should do is give them all a chance. And then I sat with the lady. I told her that she was in trouble. She had to step it up. I gave her some hints. She did, and she completed, and she was the first African-American woman in the Chicago office of Internal Revenue Service. But I say that is that, and you mentioned in the flyer, I did say something about if you got power, use it. I had power. Same power. I had the power to throw 5 people out or have 5 people stay in. And I felt it. And so, but I used to counsel many of the, in fact, there were guys who were accountants and lawyers, and I counseled them to take the CPA exam. I went to law school at night as I was working, and I graduated just before Michelle was born. And there was a rule at the Internal Revenue Service, if a person was going to school at night, they could have administrative leave to take their exams. So my supervisor was the only Black supervisor in the Chicago office audit. And he looked at the rules and he said, David, I know you're leaving. So you're not entitled to administrative leave because it's not for the good of the Internal Revenue Service. And I was a little ticked off about it. Fast forward a year and a half later, he calls me and he says, David, I need a favor. I said, what is it? He says, well, the Illinois passed the income tax and he was scheduled to, he had interviewed and was one of the top candidates to run the Department of Revenue's income tax. Would you give me a reference? And I'm sitting there saying, you know, this And my dad told me, if you can do good, do good. Despite that incident when I was leaving internment, I said, okay. I gave him a glowing reference, and he got the job. And I guess the thing is when you can help, help. When I was in the tax department, I'll drift a little bit and then I'll come right back. I was the only Black person in the tax department, but I had goals in mind. Plus, I was more mature than most of us coming out of school looking for jobs at public accounting firms. And an incident happened that 5 or 6 of my co-workers were standing at the water fountain, and they asked me, David, how does it feel to be the only Black in the tax department? And I just glibly said, I'm not. There's another one in this tax department who's Black, who's trying to pass for white. And I know who it is. I know it is. And they looked at each other. They all walked away because they didn't know what I knew. And it might have been any of them. But you have to have a way of dealing with situations in a nice way. I didn't say anything about race or anything. They brought it up. So I just said, one of you are one of my brothers. So, but when I left Arthur Andersen, I went to work for a company named NiSource, which is the parent company of Northern Indiana Public Service Company. And I was a vice president. They bought a group of companies in Indianapolis. IWC, Indianapolis Water Company, was the major subsidiary. I did the due diligence. When I recommended they buy it, they said, well, you go run it. So I went to Indianapolis, and there were no women and no Blacks in top management. I was the first to go down. And when I left there, 6 of the top 11 jobs were Blacks and women. As a matter of fact, I hired a guy the first year, and I told him, you're assistant purchasing director. Next year, you'll be purchasing director. And I told the purchasing director that be ready to retire next year. So when I left, when my company sold the Indianapolis Water Company to the city of Indianapolis, the city asked me, who should be president? Who should take your space? And it was a guy I hired. He was an SMU graduate, and he just wanted to work at the water company because his father, he was very well qualified. He had a degree in marketing. So when I left, I put a Black guy in that seat. And so I've got a lot of stories I could tell, but I know what time it is.
Yeah, we should save them for later because it is, you are the pioneer of the group. And so, of course, I would love to hear your stories all day, but we also want to go back to Alexandra and hear about like the way that the path that you paved created more opportunities for her, because you're talking about being the only person in the tax department. But Alexandra is in a situation where in college, she had a group of friends that she went on to become, to pass the CPA exam with. So Alexandra, could you tell us a little bit about the importance of finding a support network and how NABA or other organizations helped you reach that?
No, you're absolutely right, NABA. And it's funny because I realized earlier today that this is sort of a full circle moment for me, because like I mentioned earlier, my interest in the accounting field was jump-started in high school when I attended the ACAP program. So I learned about, the Big Four. I learned about what all the opportunities available that we kind of talked about earlier with Paul that are available for people that are in the accounting profession. And then when I went to LSU, I joined the NABA student chapter there. and served on the board for multiple years, made some of my best friends to this date from in that organization, attended numerous NABA conferences, led our meetings with our professional sponsors, sort of shaped my professionalism while I was in college, allowed me to get my first internship, made, like I said, some of the friends that you mentioned earlier that I'm still friends with to this day, who have, in my process to becoming a CPA, were my accountability partners, were my study partners, the people that pushed me when I wasn't feeling like I wanted to continue with my studies, helped me stay disciplined. So that network that you mentioned is super important, and NABA has allowed me to forge a lot of those relationships. And then to today, I'm a CPA now, and I'm sitting here on this call with many of my family members who are also CPAs, celebrating our legacy and our family of CPAs. And it's kind of surreal to sit back and realize that what the organization that initiated my interests in the field is now recognizing and honoring myself and my family as well for our accomplishments, which is pretty amazing to experience.
Well, it's a beautiful transformation of the past 60 years, right? From when David got his CPA in 62 to today. It's a reminder that some progress has been made, mostly because of lifting as we climb, right? Absolutely. Not necessarily so much because there've been as much change as there should be outside. But you're from your office that you're in now, you're not the only Black person in your team, right?
No, and that's even interesting enough. I started my career with KPMG in the Baton Rouge chapter, where it's a smaller office. So yes, the number of Black people is smaller, but now in the Tyson's DC offices, every time I'm on, I am no longer the only one, which is really nice to see and be a part of, and as well as our affinity boards and things like that are very alive and well and prevalent today, that I'm sure weren't back in the days when David was at Arthur Andersen.
Yeah. I've been to the Virginia suburbs office when Frank Ross was the managing partner.
Yeah.
And so and he was one of the founders of NABA, as everyone knows. And so it really is you're also in a historic office. Yeah. So you have a lot of, and you said you were on the board, but you were secretary and vice president and president of NABA, right?
Yeah, so worked my way up through the ranks.
That's beautiful, though. That's really great. Thank you. And back to Louis again. You talked earlier, when we were planning for this meeting, one of the things you said that made a big impression on me is that you were talking about the importance of wealth with a conscience, and about how, although your family helped each other, like Alexandra was just saying, that you have a family dynasty, it's also important to help others outside of the family. Can you share why this is so important to you and other members of your family?
Well, it's just a matter of what's right. When you realize when you've had any success in life, you just realize that you didn't get there by yourself. And, as you get older, and of course, I recognized it at a young age, because when you're the 8th of 11 children, you get a lot of help from the 7, and certainly the top 3 who are a lot older than you, so they're able to help. So, as I said, it's very hard to grow up being selfish when you grow up in a family that large. So it just carries over. It becomes part of you, that you reach out and you help others. We talked about family. Yes, Alexandra interned with me for a couple of summers. Michelle, like I said, came out of college having a job, and she worked for me. My brother-in-law, who was also a CPA, who is deceased, also, when he got out of the Army, he was looking and trying to decide exactly what he wanted to do, and he was living in New Orleans. And I said, well, Joe, you're a CPA, come up here, I'll find some work for you. And that's exactly what happened. But one of the things that NABA, I tell people with NABA, it became an employment agency. Because when people had job openings, whether they were at the city colleges or wherever, we always said, you think so-and-so's looking for a job? So we hired a lot of people. When we talk about the coaching trees in NFL, we have accounting trees, and not just within the public accounting firms, just period. I mean, my dear friend Lacey Thomas, who passed back in December, was at city colleges as the CFO. He was at Cook County Hospital as the COO and CEO. and CFO, I'm sorry, over the years, he must have hired at least 20, 30 people who came through NABA at all levels, entry-level people, senior people, and that's been important. In my own firm over the years, I've had a lot of employees come in and out, and a lot of those people I met through NABA, or they became involved in NABA as a result of working with me. When we formed the chapter, Tom Barrow, who was one of the early national presidents of NABA, and Phil Pierce came to Chicago when we formed that chapter back in 1977. And I ended up being Tom Barrow's partner in his firm. We actually opened the Chicago office for his Detroit operation. And so that whole thing of the circle, and also when we look at the first 100 Black CPAs in Illinois, in somewhat amazement, I had probably personally interacted with those people, either working with them on joint ventures or just sharing work with them, or them sharing clients with me. So that's really when you realize just how tight-knit the profession is, and just how it has prospered over the years, because everybody understands that there's an interdependency. And that goes across the country. Like I said, certainly with Tom, I was partners with James Hill at Hill Taylor, and he had a Chicago office. I remember we made a failed attempt to open an office in New Orleans. But we found out very quickly, while there was a couple nice government contracts down there, there just wasn't the private industry and people who had the ability to pay the rates that we needed to charge in order to be able to sustain the office. But it's just one of those things that's happened throughout the nation. I mean, I know CPAs throughout the nation through NABA, and many whom I've actually done joint ventures to work with and referred each other clients.
Yeah, it's an amazing network meeting. Once when I started interviewing people, I was amazed by how many people knew the prior people I'd interviewed, because I started out interviewing the first dean of the business school at Howard University, and I just did it because it was convenient for me, because I was living in the East Coast at the time, and boy, everybody knew him from then on. It was like, oh, you talked to Milton Wilson? Yeah, come on down, talk to me too. So it's a smaller world than you'd think would be possible given the expanse of a country that we live in. So thank you. I've also been blown away by all the community involvement in the Kelly Williams family, not just in NABA, but in other community development organizations as well. And as Alexandra said before, she got interested in becoming an accountant partly through ACAP. And we're currently, and I'm on the ACAP board here in San Francisco, and we're currently expanding the ACAP program. And I was wondering, Kathy, if you have any suggestions from the mentoring work that you do with young women and also with the juvenile justice system, if you have any suggestions of what we can do to better reach out to youth who don't have 6 CPAs in their family.
So that's a really good question. And I just want to go back to something that Lewis said, that, I started with those minority CPA firms. When I first graduated, getting that first job, I worked for a Black CPA firm, Wallace Walker. I worked with Vicki Hudson and company. And that is the start of the mentorship right there. Because I can tell you through my experiences with those firms, I learned a lot. And even though I went and got into the financial services area, all the things, there's a lot I learned from just being associated and doing the work that I was able to do with those firms. So, mentorship is an important thing. And I served on 2 boards, one Ladies of Virtue, because I wanted to give back as well. And I served on 2 boards. One is Ladies of Virtue and the other one is Storycatchers Theater. And these firms, both these nonprofit organizations, really spoke to my heart, because Ladies of Virtue mentors young women, and Storycatchers supports teens who've been touched within the criminal justice system. And teaching young women like Ladies of Virtue to be confident and to provide them with leadership skills as they work with mentors was just really, really important. And I know that was important for me growing up. And I'll also say that with story catchers, they allowed those who've been touched by the part of the criminal justice system to tell their story through theater. And this at the same time will provide them with an opportunity to emerge and be better when they emerge from court involvement. So those are two key things, because what I've learned from both these organizations is that many young people don't have access to the mentors that exist within the Kelly family, where, you know, Michelle can look to her father and say, hey, I see what he's doing. I want to do what he's doing. So some of our youth don't have access to that. So I think we should really continue to seek out finding those opportunities where we can mentor young adults in these types of situations and reach out beyond our own homes at this point to help and support these types of initiatives.
I think that's beautiful. And I noticed also in your bio that you are a proud graduate of the Chicago Public Schools.
Yes, I'm very proud of being a graduate of the Chicago Public Schools, because I sometimes think they get a bad rap. And I think good things come from students of CPS. So,
yeah, and you know what it's like, that absence of mentorship or the presence of mentorship can make a huge difference with these talented young people who just don't have necessarily the exposure, the connections.
That's correct.
Students. And that's what we're trying to do with ACAP as well. So I'm honored to be among such a bunch of people who have such a great set of careers and also do so much community service, which brings me back to Michelle, because you also work on financial literacy with adults and children through your church and also through not-for-profit organizations. And one of the things that's been a common theme lately is building intergenerational wealth. And I just wondered I know we don't have time for all the topics to go into as much detail as we'd like to, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how your role in teaching financial literacy plays into building that wealth that African-American families can use as a basis to build their careers and their legacies.
Sure. First, I want to say years ago, I just remember Paul and we did ACAP volunteers as well. That was a lot of fun. I think everybody should actually volunteer with that. Through my sorority and through my church, I presented budget classes, credit classes. I just think that everyone should definitely give back any way that they can. And I know I've always been into budgeting and making money. Actually, it was making money on credit cards, and I know how to do that. And keep your credit 800. You need an 800 credit score. So, in summary, I think that's very important. Intergenerational wealth is very important. As we say in our family, we were successful because we saw our parents successful. We had no choice but to go to college. I didn't know that people didn't go to college until I was graduating from high school saying, where are you going? And what do you mean you're not going to college? So it's very important. Education is very important, and just making sure that the next generation is doing as well as you are doing, or even better.
That's great that you both volunteered. Was it as counselors or just as mentors in the ACAP program?
It was a presentation that we did in ACAP.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm always glad to hear that. So Paul, we were talking about mentoring and people following in others' footsteps, but I was kind of curious because you sort of broke the mold in some ways as an accountant, as we talked about earlier. And I was wondering, did coming from such an illustrious family of CPAs make it easier or harder to say, no, I'm gonna go work in the media industry and I'm gonna move to Houston or to Canada?
It's just kind of funny when you say illustrious family, because for me, they're just my family. And I think, even Alexandra said, it's like, that they're just my family. And I think one of the great things I've just put my family is that, they're all down to earth folks, and I was blessed to have them as role models. And you even mentioned, it's how much more likely you are to be successful when you have a role model. And they were always approachable. Remember asking David, even when I was in high school, when I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do, what he thought, and what he thought about accounting. I think, just having family members who have achieved what they've achieved, believe in you more than you sometimes believe in yourself is it's just invaluable. So having them there as role models and support would definitely make it easier. I will say that the one thing kind of Michelle said too is, but having those people up there also kind of gives you a little bit of pressure too. You're like, okay, wait, I can't really be messing up here.
I do like,
but overall, it was much easier.
That's great, because you point out that it wasn't just something to aspire to, but also the accountability partners that Alexandra mentioned earlier. Alexandra, that was a new term to me, but I really like it, accountability partners, because it sounds like, yes, they're holding you accountable. So in that sense, that they're setting high expectations that they want you to achieve, but also they're your partners. They're supporting you in doing that. They're not just saying, here's what you have to do. They're saying, here's what we expect, and we'll help you do it.
Yeah, like Paul said, though, there is a little pressure. David had mentioned earlier that Uncle Lewis's one of his phrases, he said, well, if I can pass it, you can pass the CPA exam. And, you fail a couple of parts and it's like, okay, this is pretty hard, but all right, I'm going to keep pushing through.
But that's, it's a double-edged sword, I can see, but in the long run, I can see that it's success for everybody. And speaking of the long run, we've got all kinds of NABA members and professionals from around the world. I got emails from Australia about this event. So this Toya and Portia did a great job marketing this event. So I'm just really curious, David, what advice you have for all of us who are trying to follow in your footsteps in terms of making a successful and fulfilling career?
Well, I got a long list of things. Actually, I compiled this list back in the 70s and 80s, but it really starts with yourself. And I always say you have to like yourself and love yourself and feel comfortable that you can move forward and help other people as you move. Now, I always felt that everybody is a profit center. If you don't look at yourself as a profit center, whatever you do, whether you are in accounting or in finance or sales, you're a profit center. And you should be accountable for what you bring to the table that can show that you're adding to the organization or yourself or your family. And I always say you should build relationships. You're not in this world alone. You're not going to succeed alone. You have to have social and business and family relationships in order to move forward. And you have to, as my father would have said, you have to sell yourself. You're the commodity. You know yourself better. You have to prepare yourself, and whatever you prepare yourself for, then you have to sell it. And to somebody for something, you just have to do that. You have to set some goals, and you should have short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. And you should have an idea of where you should be along that timeline. And so that way you are holding yourself accountable. I think you need to be realistic. We do live in a world that's not fair. And as Michelle's mother would say, nothing's fair. But you can navigate yourself through the unfair waters. I think you need to create high standards, high expectations, and work toward those expectations. I think you need to respect others and demand respect from others. It's not they respect you because they want to. You have to demand it, and you do it in different ways. You don't wave a flag or a gun or whatever. And then I think you need to be a decision maker. I mean, we talk about mentors and using mentors. And I would say that if you're having an issue, I didn't say a problem, because problem is a bad word. If you have an issue, you need to work through that issue yourself and come up with some type of decision. Then you take it to your mentor and have your mentor work with you. And what it does, it forces you to deal with the problem, the situation, and reason and come to some kind of conclusion, rather than take it to the mentor. The mentor says, do this. You say, okay. You haven't gained anything. You may have solved the problem, but the next time you have a problem, you're going to go to your mentor. You got to understand the world. And I also say that in any situation, and I've always used that, whoever you are dealing with, you have to put yourself in their position, understand their point of view, where they're coming from, what their hot buttons are. And so when I met with clients, I would kind of be like, I'm looking behind this and looking at myself through their lenses. And then you understand how to better approach situations. And keep a positive attitude. If something happened, I just, okay, yeah, that happened. I'm moving on, and I'm moving on in the direction I want to move. So those are some of the things I used to mentor people. I guess everybody's a young person now, as far as I'm concerned. But these kinds of things, but it starts with, you have to be comfortable with yourself. And the last thing I always tell young Black people, I tell them two things. One, if you're in a room and you feel uncomfortable because you're Black and nobody else, how do you know you're Black? Only thing you see is your hands. So if that's bothering you, take your hands, put them under the table, and keep working and keep talking. Then you don't see any Black people. There are no Black people. They're just people.
That was a wonderful list of advice. And one of the things that I think, one of the reasons I think you have such a great list is you started making it back in 1974, if not earlier. So you were giving advice to young people when you were quite a young person yourself. So I want to thank everybody on the panel, the family, for doing such a, for sharing their experiences so openly with this audience that we have. And I was going to just ask Toy, do we have any questions?
I don't think I've seen questions, lots of comments. Someone shared that they learned about David Kelly from a 1981 publication of Ebony Magazine, where they were capturing Black accountants. So I don't see questions from the audience, although we do have a few minutes, and if anyone wants to submit a question for the Kelly Williams family, you can do so. But there are a lot, of course, John Adams is in the comments, and he is just thrilled to see this family being honored and acknowledged for all of your contributions to NABA and to the accounting and CPA professions at large. So lots of shout outs and kudos in the comments. Theresa, if you're concluding your questions before we leave, I would definitely want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, CLA, American Express, Netflix, Abbott and Microsoft for sponsoring our Black History Month campaign and for supporting us in bringing this family together and bringing this conversation together to share with our NABA members, our partners, supporters, and beyond. As Theresa said, she was nudged by someone from Australia that had seen the advertisement or the promotion of this event and reached out to her. So I think that's beautiful. And we are definitely looking forward to next year. We did our research and we didn't find another family that had more CPAs than the Kelly Williams family. So we opened up the door for anyone that wants to challenge it, but we did our due diligence. So just wanted to put that out there and thank everyone for your time this evening. This was a wonderful conversation. If you joined us late, we will be making a copy of this interview available via a follow-up email for all registered participants. So look forward to that.